Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. How's it going?
Tony, I'm tremendous. We are here live inside Schmeckler Hall, home of the Michigan football team. Just got a chance to talk to Jim Harbaugh, several Michigan players. Got to find out about Happy Warriors. Got to find out about whether there's bad blood between these teams. This is always one of these press conferences where you know they're trying to not say anything interesting, but then sometimes what they do say is interesting, even if they don't mean it to be interesting.
Well, I think anytime you talk about this, if you're a coach or a player, it's going to be interesting because of it's just something that will slip out, or the way you have to phrase something, the way you have to trace your steps, or make sure you don't say anything. You end up revealing something else, and so they try, but it's impossible when you're talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to literally next comment, no comment, next question. And Jim Harbaugh did that when he was asked about the health of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, and his full quote was no update.
Yeah, that was something where he was very decisive about that. But then when offensive tackle Ryan Hayes was asked about it, he phrased it in a way that was, I immediately texted you and said, "Did you hear what he just said?" And it was, I feel like you have to have the context of the question around it when you're having these conversations and all that kind of stuff. But, it was, I'm just scrolling through my notes here. He said the full quote was, "We've planned on this. He's a great player, but I think everyone else is just going to step up with him out, and I think that we're up to the challenge." And the setup was his confidence in the offense if it had to play without Blake Corum. So it was framed as a hypothetical. So again, I'm going to read you the quote. "We've planned on this. He's a great player, but I think everyone else is just going to step up with him out, and I think that we're up to the challenge." So was that merely answering a hypothetical as a hypothetical and framing it as a reality? Was that a little bit of a slip? Was that clever subterfuge to plant it for Ohio State to think, Blake Corum is out? Your thoughts?
Well, when I heard it live, and I'm typing down what I can hear, and I hear that, and I realize, if I type this the way it sounded without the full context of the question, and I even had the question in there, to me, it sounded like he was just finishing up on the hypothetical. But we know Blake Corum is hurt. We know that they played without him last week against Illinois. At this point, do they even know if they can have him? So don't you have to assume that he's not going to go at this point if you're practicing? If you're the offensive line, you can't worry about, we need Blake. You got to move on. And I'm guessing that's probably what they have done mentally. And then if he can play, great. If he can't, they've prepared for this.
Yeah, you get that next man up mentality that Ohio State always talks about. Harbaugh was asked, well, if these guys can't practice, could they play? And he was pretty clear on no. If you can't practice, you're not going to play. So
do you believe that? Well, he did the Friday walkthrough, so he's good.
Yeah, I mean, there are loopholes there. I still feel like the most likely scenario is he at least gives it a try. I don't think that they have definitively said he will not play and decided that internally. Again, this is pure speculation, and maybe that was just really a slip of the tongue by Ryan Hayes. But I think it did not seem like it was an ACL if he was able to come back and do that. So, is it a meniscus thing? Is it a little partial ACL tear? Is it, I think Ohio State is going to have to go into the game planning for Blake Corum to be the guy. But there were also a lot of questions about, so if J.J. McCarthy has to win this game with his arm, how confident are you in that? And that to me suggests that there are a lot of people here also thinking there's a real possibility they will not have Blake Corum, and almost definitely not 100% Blake Corum.
Yeah, and the percentage of Donovan Edwards, you don't know either. And so there were plenty of questions about the deep passing game, or just the passing game kind of carrying the offense Mike Sainristil, Nickelback, was one of the players talking. I couldn't hear everything he said because, Tom, they don't amplify anything here, and it is not meant to hold press conferences. It is a museum, and it is just a lobby.
It is. And I was talking to someone who comes up here for these press conferences a decent amount. And I said, so this is kind of a weird setup for this. And he said, yeah, they used to do these in Chrysler Arena. They have a big $5 million media room in Chrysler Arena, which is where the basketball team plays. And there at one point, several years ago, Jim Harbaugh had a recruit in town or something and said, I can't go over to Chrysler today. Let's just do it in the lobby here. And so they all, everyone changed their plans. They did here. And then afterwards he said, isn't this convenient? We should just do it here all the time. And yes, it seems like it's convenient for Jim Harbaugh, but it's an unusual setup because you're just in the lobby of a museum, like you said, and they have like little barriers, the pull-out tape barriers, just to hold people back so the print writers don't step in front of the cameras and all that kind of stuff. It's at Ohio State they just do it in the team room, and I think that's where most colleges do it. This is just a little different and a little.
It's a bunch of people standing around, so I'm off in the back, got my laptop trying to type, and I felt like the commenters on YouTube when they can't hear the questions. I wanted to type into the live stream. I can't hear the questions, so I couldn't hear everything that Mike Sainristil was saying. But what he was talking about, the inability or the struggling nature of the passing game, the downfield stuff, and they were asking him, they're like, what's wrong with it? What are you seeing in practice? And he's like, well, in practice they hit it against us. So. I don't know if that's good news for Michigan or bad news for Michigan.
Because Mike Sainristil got asked about Marvin Harrison Jr. too. So that's a thing that they're aware they're going to have to face on Saturday. He said it's like they'll hit it, but it's like, he was asked who has gotten. He's like, well, Ronnie got me, and Ronnie Bell, and Roman got me, Roman Wilson. And then he said, and I think Andrew Anthony got him just last week. Which is like, well, you should be hitting more than. I mean, if it's like 3 over the last 3 weeks, that's not that many. And I, we've been talking about this all year long, and it's been screamingly apparent to us that this has been an issue with them, and it sounds like that's a major concern that. If you don't have a healthy Blake Corum, if you don't have a healthy Donovan Edwards, and it does fall on, you can't build the whole plane out of J.J. McCarthy running. And C.J. Stokes has not been, a 6-7 yard a carry guy. If you can't throw downfield, that seems like that's going to be a pretty significant issue.
Can they run downfield?
that will be, that will be a little more of a challenge if they don't have Corum and they don't have.
I don't know if Mike Sainristil said, well, they've hit it all 3 times. They've taken a shot in the last 3 weeks. But the 3 times they've thrown deep in practice, they've connected. And that's not the case. I'm sure they're throwing more than that, but it sounded like, well, hitting it in practice, but maybe few and far between against him at least. And, being a slot defender, you get matched up with different guys and you're doing different coverages. Tom, let's discuss the jovial battler that Jim Harbaugh was talking about, the happy warrior mentality that he wants his team to have, or that his team does have, coming into a game where you don't need hate, you don't need anguish or anxiety. He's got a group full of happy warriors that are excited. And I did like the fact that he talked about the privilege of playing in this game with these stakes in Ohio Stadium. He referenced Ohio Stadium as well, like playing against Ohio State in Ohio Stadium. He's grateful for that opportunity. It just seems like I even heard other people saying like he's in a pretty good mood, like a good mood on a Monday of rivalry week. Is this the product of a win in 2021? I don't know that he was this happy in 2021.
Well, and is he happy because he knows something? Is he happy because he has a win, and that makes this a much less pressure-packed game? There's more pressure on Ryan Day this year than there is on Jim Harbaugh. Now, if Ohio State wins, or especially if Ohio State wins by a couple scores, then okay, next year maybe the pressure's back on Jim Harbaugh to sort of validate it. But right now, Jim Harbaugh has last year to lean on, and
free space.
Yeah, you kind of have your you've earned your year off the hot seat by beating Ohio State. But yeah, he just the Happy Warriors thing on a Happy Warriors. He talked about the fact that they're on a happy mission, and
Happy little trees.
it's the contrast between that and Ryan Day talking constantly about toughness is interesting to me because Michigan, I think in the trenches, Michigan. There's a solid argument that Michigan is better on at least one and maybe both of the the fronts in the trenches. So it's not like this isn't a tough team and this is just a pillowy, soft, marshmallowy, squishy. But the happy mission, is that just trying to remind you to take joy in what you're doing and try and take some of the pressure off of what is a really big game. I don't know what to read into that.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some different ways of looking at things, as we know, and this is certainly one of them, because the easiest way is what I wanted to ask, and I didn't get a chance to because I waited too long to get my hand up, Tom, because I was in the back, was just like, how do you approach this after a win? How much different is it approaching it after a win than it is after a loss? Because motivating a team after a loss is pretty easy. Like, it's easier than motivating a team after a win. And, Happy Warriors does not feel like motivation. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but even I think maybe it was Ryan Hayes, somebody was asked about it and I couldn't hear the entire answer, but he kind of like brushed it off a little bit, like, we're not happy, something like that, something to that effect. Because as a player, to buy into, I'm a happy warrior, I don't see that happening. And how much does buy into a label really matter? That particular label was just a little odd, underwhelming.
Yeah, and we've gone through all sorts of different cycles of labels, and the Urban Meyer had the one year that was the land of the wolves or something, and it was like, what does that even mean? And it meant that they were going to wear a gray jersey against Penn State, I guess, and that's about all it meant. But like sometimes coaches will have, everyone has their they read the book about the guy climbing Mount Everest, and then they have an ice axe and they bring it to every meeting, and like they all have their themes of the year, and that's just like his theme this year. They have everyone talked about the fact that they have worked Ohio State every day. They talk about it the way that Ohio State talks about it. We work this game every day. And going back to January, they do I don't remember what they called it. It wasn't an Ohio State period, I don't think, but it was something like that.
Iroquois stretch?
Something like that. Iroquois twist, Tony, please. It was, they do this every day, and the players talk about the coaches kind of leaving like breadcrumbs and just sort of like, hey, you have to, so you got to be where your feet are. You have to play the team that, if it's Hawaii week, you have to be ready for Hawaii, but also they're going to be talking a little bit about Ohio State just to kind of keep that front of mind. So that, I think, is a change from a few years ago where Michigan felt like they were sort of de-emphasizing the rivalry. And now that is kind of back to being, for years sort of involuntarily and in a negative way, that was the game that defined this team. Now, after a win, and they ran over Ohio State last year, and that's, the identity of toughness and being tough in the trenches. Now that's a positive identity that you can sort of build your brand around. And they seem to maybe be embracing that more than they used to.
I do think you have to have kind of equal the embrace, equal the energy, the focus, because it's the old adage of, somebody's always working harder than you are. Like somebody's always more angry about this game than you are, that sort of thing. The team that lost is going to be much more angry and more focused. But so you have to match that. You have to match that kind of energy, that focus, that desire. And, spending 365 days a year doing that, like it's not something you're going to overlook as a team that you won it last year. You experienced that feeling. Like you don't want to give that up. You don't want to, you've now experienced the loss. You've experienced the win. Which would you prefer? That is enough. That's plenty of motivation. Ask Mozzie Smith about what's it like having the win for the last year. And it's like, it's fine, but it's over. Like that was last year's team. It doesn't mean anything for this year's team. Yeah, he wants another one, but like it sounded to me what he said is like the wins year over year over year. That's more for the fans. Like, oh, we want 3 in a row. We want 4 in a row. That's more for the fans. It's a new team each year, so you want the one to know more than anything.
Yeah, and last year's team is not playing this year's game, so it doesn't matter. Last year's game doesn't matter anymore in terms of what this team is going to do. So, yeah, that's a pretty typical answer for that type of question. There were, he was also, Muzzy Smith was also asked, in a game like this, how much does the defense take on itself to have to be the ones that wins the game? That the offense doesn't have to score a million points, that the defense can win the game. He said, you don't ever want to be the reason in a game like this. You don't ever want to be the reason, and the reason that you lost. What's fascinating to me about the Michigan and the taking it seriously and all that is you go back over the years, the time after Ohio State has lost to someone. The year after, Michigan had their famous revenge tour in 2018, which worked great until it got to Columbus. Ohio State has had, the sort of revenge tour. The most recent one that springs to mind is after that 2019 Fiesta Bowl against Clemson. Clemson was like the story, and that was the focus in the Woody Hayes pretty much all year. And they didn't even know, that it wasn't on the schedule. It was just, maybe they'll get a chance to play Clemson again. And when they did, they annihilated Clemson in that game. And you wonder, everyone has this game circled all year, fans, players, coaches. This game is circled on everyone's calendar every year, regardless of whether you won or lost. But, is this something that if Ohio State has been focusing on this that much more this year, Michigan kind of maybe evened out the focus last year where they were focusing more on it, and Ohio State maybe got a little, you don't want to say complacent, but not as
well, it's expected.
Yeah.
And when something is expected, do you really work as hard for it?
Yeah. Well, this year it's not expected. This year it's, it's,
you got to go get it.
They're favored, but it's not, and frankly, this is fun. This is Ohio State should not be a 30-point favorite over Michigan like they were in 2020. Ohio State should not be a 17-point favorite over Michigan. This is, it's a 7.5-point line, whatever it's like that. And it may shrink a little bit from there. This is, an Ohio State Michigan game should not be like beyond all doubt before the game kicks off. That's not what this rivalry is. And if it becomes that, then congratulations, you're Florida State.
Yeah. Time you throw out the records, unless both teams are 11-0, then you keep the records in and you talk about it. And that's what we're doing. And there was also, I think Mike Sainristil was asked, what is the importance of this game, this rivalry? And he's like, currently it's the most important thing in the world. And that's the proper attitude for the people playing in it. And so, like, can you cram in 1 week? No, it's something that you have to prepare for all year long. And then of course, then it comes down to executing and getting back to the injuries. Ohio State, their injuries on the offensive line, Michigan's defensive line. Like Mozzie Smith seems very confident, as he should be. Mike Sainristil, he was asked the first question that he was asked. I don't know what he said about it, but he's going to be a larger part of this game because of Ohio State's offense. What did he have to say about that?
Yeah, the question was basically, you could be one of the more important guys this week because of their offense. How do you approach that? And it was essentially you have to just be prepared. Was more or less it. And he was asked immediately after that about Marvin Harrison Jr. and what are his strengths, and the answer there is pretty long. And this is going to be a challenge for them because this is a team that has not really faced a passing offense within an order of magnitude of what Ohio State's passing offense is this year. That's not to say they haven't played good teams, but they haven't played teams that can throw the ball like Ohio State. And you can pull up a weather report if we have an update in the weather since the last time everyone looked 15 minutes ago. But it was
51 and like half chance of rain, chance being 50%.
Yeah, and so it seems like it should be a decent, day with decent conditions where Ohio State probably should be able to at least have the opportunity to throw the ball. So in a lot of that, it's on Mike Sainristil, but it's also on the defensive line. Can the defensive line get to C.J. Stroud? Because if C.J. Stroud has time, that's not good for Michigan. If you can, but you saw last year when the defense can get pressure on them, that gets disruptive, and then all of a sudden the Ohio State passing offense doesn't look like it has in the past. We were actually supposed to talk to Jalen Harrell, one of the guys from Michigan's front seven, and then we literally just ran out of time. Some of the interviews went long, and then we didn't get to talk to Jalen Harrell. So that was too bad because that would have been, an interesting question, because he's been someone who has been an impact player in that pass rush this year, and it's a big game for Mike Sanderstill, but it's a big game for Jalen Harrell and all the other guys there too.
Yeah, I liked when Jim Harbaugh was one of the questions was about C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison, and before the question is out, Jim Harbaugh was like, "Oh, like yeah, those two guys you got to take seriously, and they understand that." Anything else that jumped out at you? Ryan Hayes, there was a lot of, control the line of scrimmage, yes. What do you get?
He was asked about, what do you tell JJ McCarthy going into his first start against Ohio State? He just said, have at it. Like, you got to just go embrace the moment.
Well, Mozzie Smith was asked, hey, what have you told your teammates about playing at Ohio Stadium? I haven't talked about it. I haven't told them anything. This is going to be their first time there for the vast majority since 2018, and it's going to be a different environment. And they were asked, how does the Iowa game or one of their other road games prepare them?
Rutgers,
prepare them for this. And I don't know what the answer was, but it doesn't.
Well, I mean, the answer was, you've played in hostile environments before, but and Iowa can get loud. Rutgers is Rutgers and Iowa are not the same thing in terms of road environments.
There's probably a 50-50 split of fans.
Yeah,
and we saw how many Michigan fans stayed for the end of the Illinois game, which students stay in your seats.
Harbaugh was asked about how his team is going to respond to his toughest opponents to date. He said, I think you're going to find we're made of the right stuff. And also compared Ohio State and Michigan to two superheroes fighting, and that when you are a superhero, you don't really know what you're made of until you face another superhero who can can meet you toe to toe, basically. And then Mozzie Smith was asked, he talked about the superhero thing as well, and he said, someone asked him, so which superhero would you assign to Michigan and which one would you assign to Ohio State?
Yeah, and he said, well, I like Batman. So he gave Batman to Michigan, and then said Ohio State, they can be Iron Man. They've got they've got some cool stuff. Or he said something about how they've got some
cool tools.
Cool tools, like and it kind of makes sense because Iron Man can fly and Batman can't. It's like, but
doesn't he have the Batwing, Tony?
He has a vehicle.
That's the Batmobile, but doesn't he have the Bat? I mean,
Tom, these vehicles fly. He can't propel himself like Iron Man can.
I don't think Robert Downey Jr. can fly either without the suit.
Right, but that's a suit. It's not a vehicle.
Anyway,
you don't need a license to drive a suit. What an idiot.
I'm scrolling through here and see if there's anything else that we haven't talked about yet. There was just a lot of describe the current state of the rivalry, and it was all very respectful. It was, we don't have to hate them. We can embrace the fact that we're both good and everyone's good and it's fine. And you get the sense that that's probably not going to be the words that are said in the locker room at 11:40 on Saturday morning,
nor in the tunnel as both teams are trying to get to the field. But if this ends up going in a bad way for Michigan, it's going to be real easy to look at this friendly, we're just going to go out there and have fun and see, these are our pals, and Ohio State will be like, I was never your friend. I never liked you.
Like Homer coming out to fight Jedrick Tatum at 2. Why can't we be friends? Yeah, it was just very. It was not the tone that you expected.
But it's also not the tone that gets splashed all over Twitter and news channels. So probably, and talking to us means nothing, in terms of what happens on Saturday. But I expected a little bit more fire, but I think he's in a good place right now. And maybe that's, as a head coach, should you ever be in a good place?
Yeah, that's where you get kind of complacent, isn't it? I mean, and he's got a nice contract, and he's all settled, and everyone's happy with him right now. He hasn't lost to Ohio State since 2019, and so everyone's happy with him right now. You do wonder if if they are telling the truth about how they're approaching this game. That doesn't seem like that's a good thing for Michigan. But I don't think you read too much into that, because it feels like that's kind of like, well, you're saying the things you need to say, and then you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a press conference on Monday before the game.
Mm-hmm.
The owner's manual for this sort of thing is don't screw up the press conference.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say something you wish you hadn't. And so it's better to say something that people are like, I was totally unblown away by what just happened there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very disappointed, as opposed to now I've got 6,000 words that I have to put down, and we don't even have time to talk about this because we have to go tell everybody else about what he just said. And it's like, that didn't happen.
Yeah. And, one of the other things that was answered like that was the, Ryan Day's hang 100 versus Jim Harbaugh's born on third base thing. And he kind of said, yeah, that's not that. I don't think that has any bearing on anything this week, which is, what you say in the weeks after or the hours after a win, next year always feels like a very long time away. And then next year gets there and it's like, in retrospect, perhaps I should not have said those words. The third base thing feels like something that no one wants to talk about it beforehand. And I'm sure on Tuesday, Ryan Day is not going to want to talk about it. But after the game, if, it goes one way or the other, you might hear something about that again.
Yeah. Also, Kevin asked Jim Harbaugh, have you seen a difference in Ohio State's toughness this year? And he said no. No, I'm just kidding. He said yes. He said, yeah, they're more physical, all of that good stuff that he was right to say and safe to say. And be like, they look exactly the same to me. Like that's the last thing a coach is going to say after they've beaten them. So, but I don't think he's lying.
No.
I mean, we've seen it for much of the year, and there's been some short yardage issues, but overall, offensively and defensively, I think this is a team that is better at the line of scrimmage than it was a year ago. And that's what's gonna decide it on Saturday. I mean, injuries being what they are, line of scrimmage, it evens everything out.
Do we have any questions we need to answer?
Yeah, we're at about 240 people right now. This one's mostly for Tony. So can Iron Man take out Batman? That seems like to be a question of some importance. Not a superhero gal, so I have no clue. And that's from Glasswing Butterfly.
Well, I mean, yes. Like, provided it depends on what cape Batman is wearing, because it's all magical and different sciences and molecules. Time you don't understand it, it would just depend. But also, he can just take him up into space and freeze him. Just fly him up into space.
So what I'm hearing is we need to find out if Michigan's wearing alternative uniforms this week. Is that?
There you go. A Vapor Lock Nike Zoom.
Marketech says, do we think the nickel package is going away for this game?
The nickel package going away for this game.
I think you'll see some of it, but I think you'll see more Cody Simon, maybe some Josh Proctor instead of Tanner McAllister. But Jim Knowles does like to keep that out there. But also, Blake Corum doing what he does. Do you need a faster guy out there doing what he
right? Yeah, and I feel like the answer to that is almost it depends on does Blake Corum play? What percentage healthy is Blake Corum? Does Donovan Edwards play? What percentage healthy is Donovan Edwards? Because Donovan Edwards as a running back is fine. I think of him more in terms of being out of the backfield as a receiver. Who do you want to have covering Donovan Edwards? Do you want to have Tanner McAllister or Cody Simon? I mean, it feels to me like the answer there is Tanner McAllister. So now, if it's C.J. Stokes and Isaiah Gash, I mean, do they? At that point, do they need to bring in? Do they need to go away from the nickel, or? I don't know that you do, because we'll see how well Michigan runs.
Yeah, well, I would think maybe, like I said, maybe Josh Proctor being a bigger guy, because there's going to be a ton of 12 personnel, so maybe that he's your third safety, and he's maybe a better matchup against tight ends. Now Tanner McAllister has done it, his entire life at Oklahoma State, and also at Ohio State has defended some tight ends, but that's what it's going to come down to in this one. Do you stay in nickel because of a fear of Roman Wilson? something like that. They're going to play it all. Like what Jim Knowles says is you always have to just continue to don't let them see the same thing over and over and over again. Don't let them get comfortable. Let them see different things. Even if you're going to do the same thing, show it differently.
Yeah, and you'll see that sometimes where they'll have those 5 defensive backs lined up straight across the field, and they can do pretty much anything out of that because guys can go any direction, but you're giving them a different look even if you're showing them the same thing. It's like the teams, the air raids like this where you're running like 4 plays, but you're doing it out of all these different formations and motions and whatever, and that makes you dress it up real differently, but it's the same basic stuff.
Got a couple more that just came in. Stephen Cherry, Buckeyes win the coin flip. Do you receive or kick it?
Defer. Always defer.
Yes, because you want the halftime being able to score right before half, score right after half, kind of have the back-to-back possessions. That's you always defer if you're asking me.
Yeah, especially in a game that is the talent is equated. Like don't even more so than trying to get 2 possessions in a row. Don't give up 2 possessions in a row at the end of the second and the start of the third. Stay away from that.
M. Goboski, Michigan and Ohio State should each wear their home unis like USC, UCLA.
Yep.
Yes, 100%. Both teams should wear their home uniforms. Absolutely. I don't know. We just had an election day, so we probably missed it. But that should be like some sort of put on a ballot, some sort of initiative. We're just act of Congress, presidential act, something like that.
Another one from M. Goboski. If Corum doesn't play, we have no chance. Edwards has had a bad hand injury. C.J. Stokes seemed injured in the Illinois game, so we have walk-on Isaiah Gash.
And I think that there's, if you don't have Corum, and potentially if you have a compromised Corum who can't, even if he's playing, if he doesn't look right, if he looks like Travion Henderson did last week, where Travion Henderson was banged up, there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, we always go back to the 2007 Michigan game where Chad Henne was injured and they were just broken at that point, and there was no fear of them doing anything offensively. And they can be out there, but they're not the same.
Jeff Straley, did I miss the daily game day weather report? I know you guys gave one, but that's so well, let's see with different apps because then we can average them out.
Okay, I'll use the Apple Weather app.
Of course you will.
Saturday, 50 degrees, 50% chance of rain.
51 degrees, 44% chance of rain. So it's a 47.
Depends on which one you want to believe there, because how much does the gap there change the impact, the potential score of the game?
We'll see who's right. I trust my sources.
Mike Ferguson, back to the superhero stuff. Batman lives in a dilapidated house from generations ago. Sounds like Michigan.
He said it. That doesn't. Iron Man lives in like top of a penthouse building, and it's like is that like the Ohio State press box? It is not.
It's high up.
Yes, that is true. All good. All right. I think we'll go ahead and wrap here then. Pretty cool place. It's a nice building. Really neat history all around the place. I'm looking at the victor's record right there in front of us, and crazy old helmets and lots of stuff. So if you're ever in Ann Arbor, stop on by, grab yourself a spot out by the parking meter, come on in, and just take a look around. It's football history. Even if you don't like Michigan, you like football history. So that will then do it for us from here. A reminder, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there. You can find us, of course, at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, where you are right now. If you're watching this, also go ahead and hit that thumbs up. Like it. Let the algorithms help us help you. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.